The story you are about to hear is not just about oil. It is about life support, about the black blood that kept a dying empire alive, about an island nation wrapped in gray drizzle, clinging to the last fragments of its global power, and about a desert kingdom forced into the role of a gas station, its sovereignty sold for pennies, its future stolen with the flick of a pen. This is the story of how Britain, victorious in war but bankrupt in peace, turned Iran into its financial lung. How a refinery on the Persian Gulf became the single most valuable piece of real estate on earth. How a frail man in pajamas, trembling with age but unshakable in moral conviction, dared to challenge one of the most powerful empires in history. And how, in response, that empire unleashed a covert war so surreal, so theatrical, so shamelessly manipulative, that it rewrote the fate of a nation for the next 50 years. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It helps us continue revealing the hidden machinery of empires and the dark deals that shaped the modern world. In 1951, the Abadan refinery was not just a refinery. It was a life support machine for Britain. A behemoth of industrial steel where oceans of black blood were sucked from Persian soil, distilled, exported, and burned across the engines of imperial commerce. By volume, by revenue, by scale, there was nothing else like it on earth. Yet while Britain celebrated cheap fuel and economic survival, the Iranians who lived in Abadan saw something different. They saw a city divided not by walls, but by mathematics. Cold, cruel, colonial mathematics. British managers lived in manicured neighborhoods with rose gardens, tennis courts, and cricket pitches. Their children went to schools with textbooks imported from Cambridge. Their wives drank tea on shaded verandas as fans pushed away the blistering Gulf heat. And just a few hundred meters away, the Iranian workers, the very men who extracted the black blood that kept Britain alive, lived in shanty towns built from discarded oil drums. Stagnant water, sewage gutters, mud streets, disease, hunger. This was not an accident. This was a design. A system engineered on the belief that the people who owned the oil should never taste the wealth it produced. Into this world stepped a most unlikely revolutionary, Mohammad Mossadegh. A man so frail he often governed from his bed. A man who wept openly in meetings, who wore pajamas during state visits, who suffered fainting spells from emotional excitement. A man the British dismissed as eccentric, unstable, unpredictable. They did not understand that beneath the trembling hands lay a spine of steel. That behind the tears sat a mind sharpened by decades of political struggle. Mossadegh was not weak. He was uncompromising. And he knew a simple truth. A nation that cannot control its own resources cannot control its own destiny. The Anglo-Iranian oil company, ancestor of today's BP, paid Iran a fraction of what American companies paid Saudi Arabia. It refused transparency. It refused audits. It refused fairness. It refused dignity. Iran was treated not as a partner, but as a gas station. A pit stop to fuel an empire limping through the ruins of World War II. The British Empire may have won the war, but it emerged broken. Rationing debt, national exhaustion, factories silent, treasury empty, a victory on paper, a bankruptcy in reality. And so, Abadan, far away, scorching hot, rich with black blood, became the empire's last breath. The refinery was not just profitable, it was essential. It kept the pound afloat, the navy fueled, and Britain's global relevance intact. When Mossadegh nationalized Iranian oil in 1951, British officials reacted as if he had drawn a knife across their throat. Winston Churchill, back in office, spoke of Mossadegh not as a politician, but as a threat to civilization itself. The old lion of empire still roared, and he vowed to claw back what he believed was Britain's birthright. But Mossadegh was not backing down. For him, nationalization was not an economic decision. It was a rebirth, a reclaiming of pride, a declaration that Iran was not a resource to be extracted, but a nation to be respected. Britain responded with legal warfare, economic blockades, covert sabotage, and diplomatic pressure. Nothing worked. Mossadegh held firm with the single-mindedness of a man who had waited his entire life for this moment. And so, when Britain could not win through diplomacy, it turned to shadows. Enter the CIA. The Americans, initially sympathetic to Mossadegh, were persuaded by Churchill and by their own Cold War paranoia that Iran might tip into Soviet hands. What began as a British economic crisis was rebranded as an existential threat to Western civilization. In 1953, Operation Ajax was born. Its architect, a single American operative with a famous name and a suitcase full of cash, Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of a president. His mission was simple: take down a democratically elected leader and replace him with a compliant monarch without leaving fingerprints. What followed was not a coup in the traditional sense. It was a performance, a piece of political theater that used crowds like props and newspapers like scripts. Roosevelt paid mobs to riot. He paid thugs to pose as communists and attack mosques. He paid religious leaders to denounce Mossadegh from the pulpit. He paid journalists to fabricate stories of chaos. He paid generals to betray their oaths. With a single suitcase of cash, he bought himself a revolution. But the darkest moment came through the airwaves. The BBC, Britain's global voice of virtue, was used to send a coded signal to the coup plotters. A single phrase, broadcast innocently at exactly midnight, confirming that the operation was underway. The empire that once claimed to civilize the world now used its most trusted institution as a tool for overthrowing a democracy. Within days, Mossadegh was arrested. Within weeks, the Shah returned on a wave of American backing. Within months, Iranian oil was back under Western control, and Britain had resuscitated its economy through the financial lung of Abadan. But the cost was staggering. The coup shattered Iranian democracy. It laid the foundations for a brutal 25-year dictatorship supported by Western intelligence. It bred resentment, repression, radicalization. It turned a people's dream of dignity into a nightmare of fear. And, in the long arc of history, the 1953 coup did not secure stability. It detonated a time bomb because it led directly, predictably, and devastatingly to the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And that revolution reshaped global politics for half a century. Hostages, sanctions, proxy wars, regional upheaval, nuclear tensions, a wound that is never healed. All because in 1953, Britain chose its balance sheet over a nation's sovereignty, chose oil profits over human dignity, chose empire over ethics. The oil heist worked. Britain breathed again, but the world would pay for it. History is a ledger, and the ink is never dry. The debts of 1953 are still collecting interest today. If you found this investigation revealing, help us uncover more hidden stories by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Together, we expose the shadows behind the stories you thought you knew. History is never clean, and sometimes the darkest crimes are committed not with guns, but with contracts, signatures, and silence. History is not forgotten, it is underwritten.